Welcome to the News Project Live, a weekly conversation with media industry experts and innovators about the future of news brought to you by the News Project. Our first guest for this episode is Emily Ramshaw, co-founder and CEO of the 19th. Our hosts are Merrill Brown, CEO, and Alex Leo, head of audience. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please share and mention your friends, let them know about it, bring them into the conversation. Without further ado, Merrill Brown and Alex Leo.
Good evening. I'm Merrill Brown from the News Project. Every Thursday evening, we'll be bringing you important guests and provocative conversation about the news business and about the challenges the news business faces today. We'll address issues in local news, national news, about video and audio, about new revenue streams, and important innovation going on in news, and that's our topic tonight. At our company, The News Project, we're working to build technology and services that help news entrepreneurs achieve sustainable business models. More on our work a little later in the program, and I'll be talking to Alex Leo about our company. And please send us your questions. Good evening, Alex. I'm pleased that we're able to do this tonight and going forward.
Absolutely. Welcome to all. Please, if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, share this out, tag your friends who would be interested. It'll live afterwards as a standalone video, but we want you to participate in real time. So say hi to us from wherever you are.
Thanks, Alex. And then on to our show tonight. Our guest tonight is Emily Ramshaw. A warm welcome to Emily, who joins us from Austin, Texas, where she's launched the 19th, a reference to the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. They'll cover the nexus of politics, policy, and gender in innovative ways. They've raised a significant amount of money to start the 19th from people like the Rockefeller Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Craig Newmark, Catherine Murdoch, and many other large and small donors. We're pleased to have Emily join us, and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you this evening.
Hi, Emily.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Emily. How's life in Austin, Texas in lockdown?
Well, let's see. I'm homeschooling a 4-year-old and trying to launch a media startup in a global pandemic. So, it's been real.
Another day at the office. All right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for making time for us tonight. At a time when business models are challenged, and you were the editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, which did a lot to reinvent news business models. Building a new news organization is particularly challenging. Then we layer the pandemic upon it. Share with us how you made the leap from the widely respected Texas Tribune to the 19th.
Sure. Well, the Texas Tribune was the dream job of a lifetime. It's an extraordinary organization that really pushed boundaries in its business model and found what is just an extraordinary and sustainable way for local news to endure in the state of Texas, my home state. Honestly, this idea first came to me 4 years ago, right after Trump was inaugurated. I had a little baby girl. I was starting to think about the ways that women saw and perceived of themselves in the media and thought, what if I took the Texas Tribune's nonprofit business model with these really diversified revenue streams and tried to extrapolate it onto the national stage for women, politics, and policy. So that's what I'm trying to do here. The business model, the sort of streams of revenue are largely the same in theory. Obviously, this might look a little different in practice in the midst of this pandemic environment, and happy to talk through that a little bit more if you're interested.
Well, tell us initially how you conceived of the revenue model in the context we're in, and then, updated with the pandemic challenge.
Sure. So, we're looking at a nonprofit business model, an entrepreneurial nonprofit business model. That means a combination of philanthropic and foundation grants, a robust membership program, sort of viewers like you style membership program, corporate underwriting, live events, those things combined ideally into revenue streams that are largely equal in size. Now, that was the vision. I think the question is, what is the reality in this particular moment in time? I'll tell you what we're seeing is philanthropy still feels strong. The same, donors and foundations who came to us very early in the fundraising process for us, which we began, about a year ago, they're still very deeply engaged and in some ways see this moment as being even more critical for us and for them, given the disproportionate effects many of the effects of this pandemic are having on women. I will say, the corporate environment is really the question mark at this point. We have seen some of those dollars convey. We are launching our sort of virtual live events business this coming Monday, and we have seen some corporate underwriting stick around for that. I think the question mark is what it looks like longer term, what it looks like in the advertising space. So for us, that's still the sort of TBD.
Well, that gives us a segue for you to talk about live events and your launch upcoming next week.
Absolutely. So we are hosting, we had announced a 6-city listening tour that we were really excited about, being in person, in the flesh, in communities around the country. We sold out the first of those events, like literally within 3 hours of our soft launch in January. We are pivoting those in-person events to 6 major newsmaker events with national players. We have announced the first of those, which is a virtual conversation with Stacey Abrams on Monday. You guys will get the sneak peek, but pretty soon we'll be announcing the second of those, which is a conversation later this month with Ronna McDaniel, the GOP chair. So, women on both sides of the aisle, national political figures, and you can expect to see a lot more of that coming from us around our launch, which is still scheduled for later this summer.
Alex?
Yeah, so I'm so curious about this. Do you think that the draw of exploring women in politics is high enough to overcome the partisan divide of having Stacey Abrams and Ronna McDaniel? Do you think there's an overlap in that audience?
I mean, I think that's still a question mark, but I am optimistic enough to hope that there is. I really believe that when you have the same sets of women talking to the same sets of women all the time, you don't move the needle. And I think if anything, working and living in Texas has taught me, I live in Austin, which is this super progressive community, and I covered the most conservative state legislature in the country, and you still found ways that women really sort of cross these boundaries and work together to advance policy in Texas. And I think that is sort of, a microcosm, although it's hard to call anything about Texas micro. I still think it's a microcosm of what you can see at the national level. Women are not monolithic, and we are more than 50% of the electorate. And I think, you find women who have varied views and don't want to be pigeonholed or being put in a particular box. So I think there are through lines and journalism that covers women with empathy that I hope can, if it doesn't change women's mind, at least it inspires them to think and to see other perspectives.
Makes sense. And what do you think the biggest holes are in the coverage landscape today that the 19th can fill?
I think, you do see really terrific work being done at the intersection of women, politics, and policy. You see there are newsletters that do a really great job at this. There are, national publications that have this kind of work tucked into a particular vertical. What we see over and over again, what we found in our market research as we were getting ready to really seriously consider the 19th, is that almost everywhere this kind of news and information is a side dish instead of being the main course. I think there is a hunger for a community, a place where, the first story you see is the story about how the majority of new drugs are tested on men, even though we know that women metabolize drugs in a far different way, obviously relevant right now in this moment of COVID, where the stories are through the lens that so many women living and working in this moment feel firsthand. They're, like I said, more than half of the electorate, and they ought to be treated not like a stakeholder group or a special interest group, but as a primary audience.
Emily, you learned a lot, no doubt, at Texas Tribune. Texas Tribune, very innovative, well known for festivals, for great editorial coverage, innovative revenue models. What are the lessons of Texas Tribune that you bring to the 19th?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, I really grew up there. It was the last 10 years of my career. I bleed Texas Tribune yellow to this day. But so those lessons include the diversity of revenue streams. I mean, I really believe, again, launching a nonprofit, that the safest bet, the most sustainable bet long-term is to have revenue coming in from a lot of different doors. I take with me the focus on the audience as really being the primary. I mean, I think, I grew up in a news business where it was a lot of sort of preaching to the audience. It was us deciding as journalists what our readers needed to hear and sort of feeding them their vegetables that way. The Tribune, I think, in many ways sort of revolutionized a conversation with our readers, bringing them into the fold, asking them what they wanted us to be reporting on, asking us literally questions that we explored and explained back to them. And the live events, it's not just a business, this is a community. The Tribune proved the case that people want to engage in the flesh, and I hope we get to do that again very soon.
One of the tenets of our business, the business Alex and I work on, is that the future is going to be largely driven by readers, the support of readers, and reader revenue. How do you approach that with the 19th?
It's central. I mean, I think if we don't have a robust membership program, if we don't put building this community at the forefront of what we do, we're not going to succeed. And I think that's another really important lesson from the Texas Tribune is we managed to build, thousands and thousands of Texans on both sides of the political aisle across the demographic and socioeconomic spectrum who are giving anything from, $5 a year to $1,000 a year in support of this mission and this cause. To me, this is how you build audience, how you build community. We talk a lot about funnels, about sort of bringing people through the pipeline to get engaged with your organization. I want readers who are so deeply engaged that they begin evangelizing for their work and they love what we do so much that they want to put their money where their mouth is.
A fundamental revenue stream for the Texas Tribune obviously was the giant festival business and the many events you all threw. That line of revenue, shall we say, is in peril at the moment. How do you approach not having that revenue as you look at your model?
I mean, I think there are really hard questions being asked by news organizations around the country about what the pivot to virtual really looks like. I'll tell you, in our first foray into virtual at the 19th, the corporate money has conveyed. It has come along. Bumble is the sponsor for our first 6 events, and they were going to sponsor the in-person events, and now they are sponsoring the virtual events. I was on, a conversation with a bunch of my friends in the news business today, where a lot of folks were suggesting the same thing. There are some folks who are experimenting with, still charging for events virtually. There are some folks who are really focusing on the corporate underwriting piece of this. I think the question is how those dollars, whether those dollars stick around when more and more news organizations get into this business. Yes, I absolutely think the dollars that were associated with major live events like, a nationally renowned festival are in limbo in this moment.
Alex?
So Emily, when we had spoken previously, you mentioned that you don't take corporate sponsorship around specific areas of interest. Can you tell us why that is?
So I think what I said was we don't accept corporate underwriting around specific journalistic projects. So
Gotcha.
There might be a case, and I think historically at the Texas Tribune, a corporate sponsor might underwrite, all coverage of energy or all coverage of healthcare, meaning, their messaging, their branding, their logos, their advertising, in effect, would appear on those story pages. We never accepted, and I would never accept corporate dollars that were tied to a specific project, a specific investigation, because I think it threatens the integrity of that particular project, the journalism, or raises perceptions that are candidly unnecessary, that get in the way of the message of that terrific journalism.
What is
so
it
no
mean?
Sackler dollars to underwrite the opioid coverage is what you're saying.
That would not be the case at our news organization that I ran.
Emily, you probably saw the polling data, I think just yesterday or earlier this week, about the mammoth gap that exists for the Trump re-election campaign among women. How do you look at that issue as you develop your editorial coverage? I think at the moment, Biden has a 30-point polling lead among women. It's very dramatic, and pundits are saying it's the core where Biden will be able to unseat the president.
I think, look, we're going to be deeply covering not just the politics of this pandemic, but the politics of the moment for women. And I think the focus for us right now, obviously, we have, 2 candidates in a polarizing election and a lot of opinions, by women all over the map. I think we're equally focused right now on the candidates. We're equally focused on the women who are running, the surge of Republican women who are running, the, Democrats who are fighting to hang on to the seats that they won in 2018 in Congress. We're also really deeply focused on the ways that women are going to be able to get engaged in politics in a very strange sort of at-home cycle. what is the women who would be out campaigning, who would be fundraising, who would be, out on the trail. Like, what does all of this look like when we're in bunkers in our basements? How are we all going to vote? How are women going to get as deeply engaged as they were in the last election cycle, when we're literally limited by the parameters of this pandemic? So I think you can expect to see a lot of that coverage from us, and we're really excited to do it.
And do you expect it to be picked up by partner sites around the country? And what's your distribution plan? You've announced a partnership with the Washington Post, for example.
Right now, we have 2 partnerships underway. The first is the Washington Post, who is our primary national partner. But the second is our primary political reporter is based in Philadelphia, and she was grounded, of course, during the pandemic. There's no campaign trail for her to be out on. So she's been writing just unbelievable stories from Philadelphia, the biggest, poorest big city in America, about what life is like for women in that community. And those stories have been running with our first local news partner, which is the Philadelphia Inquirer. But our long-term plan, once our destination platforms are up and running later this summer, is entirely free distribution with the click of a button to any news organization that would like to run our work. And in the meantime, we're working on some sort of more specific partnerships with other major news distributors to make the distribution of that journalism free of charge, entirely seamless.
Alex?
Yeah, how do you do? I'm curious at what your plan is around fundraising around that distribution. Are there embedded links in partner sites? Like, how would that work for you guys?
Fundraising from the standpoint, so there's the corporate sponsorship that is largely associated with our platforms and our. But I also think, in my experience, the free distribution model of the Texas Tribune was what was so appealing to philanthropists and foundation supporters. I see sort of two primary aspects of this distribution. The first is our own platforms are where we build, really deep and enduring community. Women who might identify as sort of frontliners, they're already interested in one or more of these issues. Those are the women who are going to become our members. They're sort of our community. They'll see the corporate underwriting support that we have on our platforms. Then there's the push, the distribution, which is, I don't care that the woman in El Paso who picks up a newspaper on her way on the bus from job 1 to job 2, I don't care that she sees the byline that says the 19th. I care that she's reading those stories. And so from a distribution standpoint, I think the case we make to our supporters, to philanthropists, to foundations is we are helping to get these stories in front of the eyes of the women and men in this country who most desperately need them. That's not about our brand or our logo. That's about our mission.
That's fascinating.
Emily, you were very kind a few minutes ago in your very brief and limited critique of how mainstream publications deal with women's issues these days. The fact of the matter is much of the coverage is inadequate and certainly at this moment in time obscured by several larger stories. The president, who takes lots of air out of lots of conversations, and now COVID. What is the reality of the role of women in news media these days? We know there's, continuing glass ceiling conversations. There were women atop large newspapers in more significant numbers a few years ago than there are today. How do you look at that problem, and what's the 19th going to do to perhaps address it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I jumped from sort of a regional news organization early in my career to a digital news startup, I assumed that there would be lots of women at the helm of digital news startups. I thought we were starting a little revolution. And it turned out to be the case. It's pretty lonely. I look around out here and there really are not that many women leading news organizations. And there are even fewer women who I'd identify as sort of news entrepreneurs, people who are getting their hands dirty with the business models. Look, the reality is, and I think, Pew and many others have done research on this, 70% of top newspaper editors in this country are men. Almost all of them are white. Something like 63 or 64% of the reporters who are writing politics and foreign policy stories are men. Almost all of them are white. This is an industry where it is incredibly difficult to advance as a woman because there is so much inflexibility. I'm the child of 2 journalists. My mom was a longtime Washington correspondent. My parents were never home before 7:30 or 8. It was taxing to get ahead. She was expected to have her butt in the chair basically from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. And I think, I see, we announced 17 jobs at the 19th. We posted them. We got almost 1,000 applicants, almost all of them women. I would say 2/3 of those women were now in the freelance market because they had left legacy media in their late 20s and early 30s because the realities of starting a family and getting ahead in a newsroom, they were just not simpatico. And so I feel this very strongly. I mean, I'm a workhorse, but I had a daughter 4 years ago, and it changed how I think about all of this and how I think about getting ahead in this business. And so we will be a newsroom that offers, 6 months of fully paid family leave to all new parents. But like, honestly, that's not even enough for the sandwich generation. We're also offering 4 months of fully paid caregiver leave. So if you need to spend the last 4 months of your dad's life with him at his bedside, you can without risking your career or your opportunities. And we're offering something that seemed like totally, new age until a few weeks ago, which was fully remote workplaces, so that the people on our team can work wherever they have the best caregiving situation, wherever they have the best childcare. These should not be limiting factors for women trying to get ahead in this business.
I imagine it also makes it possible for you guys to have a really location diverse newsroom, right? Because not everyone has to be based in New York in an office building.
Exactly. I mean, that's been a really exciting thing. We're about to announce a whole bunch of additional hires over the next 8 weeks. And that's been really exciting because these are women and men who are all over the country. And even some of the jobs we thought we'd like to have here at headquarters in Austin, we're now reevaluating and saying, you know what? I mean, we have 11 people on our team right now, and 8 of us have never even met each other in the flesh. Like, what a surreal way to be launching a startup.
So I was fascinated when we talked previously, Emily, about you had told us that you don't accept anonymous donations, and that seems to be a reasonable place. But you said that there are issues around women, and that I was fascinated by. Can you tell our audience a little bit about it?
This has been really interesting. You know, I grew up at the Texas Tribune, where we made a decision that we would not accept anonymous gifts. We wanted to be able to basically, show our work, show where the money came from, remove all perception that there might be, anybody with their thumb on the scale. And I've taken that same mentality with me to the 19th. I will tell you, there have been some really interesting things that have happened over the last 6 months as I've been fundraising for this endeavor, where I've had women of means who want to make a gift say, I'm a young woman and I'm worried about my safety, or I'm going through a terrible divorce and I don't want to have my name be out there as attached to giving a gift of a particular size. It's been really interesting. We have not wavered from this policy, by the way. We still have this policy in place, but it's been fascinating to hear from women in the philanthropic arena, particularly single women in the philanthropic arena, that this raises questions about their safety. So it's been fascinating. It was not a conversation I expected to be having when people asked for anonymity.
If we might, Emily, let's move back to entrepreneurship for a minute. To some people watching this program who aren't in the worlds that you and Alex and I circulate in, it might seem a little counterintuitive as their local newspaper is failing, and as much of the news we read about the news is so negative, and that's obviously even worsened by the COVID-19 circumstance. What do you say to entrepreneurs who might be thinking about that, and yet they read nothing but bad headlines about newspapers closing and ad revenue down and all the bad stuff that's all around us?
Right. I mean, I will tell you, these are supremely frightening times for local media. And we are lucky that we have have had a resurgence of local news organizations, nonprofit news organizations that have managed to be pretty prolific fundraisers and get some really good and well-established membership programs in place. But yes, I mean, these are, my entire feed on social media, my emails are filled with people who are being furloughed and laid off. And I'm having conversations with people right and left, trying to advise them, there's nothing open in this market in this moment. I mean, I just think that the reality in the local news space is very dire, particularly in the for-profit local news space. So, I mean, I think, look, just by virtue of this experience, I would not recommend launching a startup right this second, but maybe, wait 9 months or 12 months and look at the landscape. I mean, I do think there are models that are going to work and going to crop up in local markets that are faced with, shuttering regional news organizations. And so I believe there are going to be innovative and interesting opportunities there. I just think the business model might not look exactly the same. It may not be exactly the Texas Tribune sort of cocktail of revenue streams or MinPost's cocktail of revenue streams that work in a particular community. I think we're going to start to sort of discover these one at a time.
You're just focusing in that part of our conversation on local, which obviously is a giant challenge as newspapers close and shrink all around us. But you're focusing on an important national vertical topic, women, politics, and policy. Are there other topics like that you'd like to see people get entrepreneurial initiatives around. I mean, you've demonstrated you can raise money if the topic is right and the timing is right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, I'm a huge fan of the work, and I'm standing on the shoulders of organizations that have done this before us, whether it's ProPublica or the Marshall Project or Chalkbeat. I mean, I'm super excited by what the folks at the American Journalism Project are doing to sort of spur innovative ideas and new news organizations. I'm excited to see the sort of, Berkeley side transition into broader news organizations in the Bay Area that have subscribers. So I think they're terrific experiments in the nonprofit arena that are going on out there, and I'm really excited by them.
Alex?
Yeah, so I'm just curious about, we're talking a lot about nonprofits, and that makes sense in the context of your organization. But, I'm so curious. We've seen huge audience numbers during this time of COVID. Like, traffic is off the chart for a lot of these organizations, but because they're solely based on advertising revenue, a lot of these places are furloughing workers and having huge economic crisis. Do you think that companies that only have one revenue stream and it's advertising based are going to be rethinking that in this time? Do you think that business model is untenable?
I think they're going to have to be, because I think if you only have one in this moment and you're hemorrhaging ad dollars, you're going to be really in trouble. I mean, I think, I've been talking to a lot of people over the last few days looking at, the New York Times's subscription numbers are incredible, the growth that we're seeing in this moment. But the advertising losses are, equally enormous. And so I think there is this sort of pivot toward so many conversations around, is it just that we need to pivot to super high quality journalism and have, higher subscription rates for those markets? I just worry at the end of the day, and there are people who say, when nonprofit isn't the solution can't just be nonprofits and billionaires buying national news organizations. I do worry that the focus on subscription at all costs might mean that we're speaking to a more elite audience. I mean, I do worry about sort of this need for the democratization of news, making sure it gets in the hands of people who can't afford to pay a steep subscription rate.
We have a question on the screen. Is from Aparna. Is there any sense of the effect of vote, run, lead, Emily's list, and is the 19th going to track, aggregate, and provide data around women candidates and women running?
We are absolutely going to track, aggregate, and provide data around women running. So stay tuned and watch. We actually have a data visuals position posted right now, so we're getting ready to move into that space. And I think that, to your other point, which flashed off the screen, I think we're absolutely going to be looking at the effects of these different organizations. There are myriad organizations working on both sides of the aisle to get women more engaged or to get them to run. We're going to be profiling, featuring a lot of those organizations and really trying to take stock of what kind of effect they're having, particularly in this very weird cycle.
Emily, I think we didn't quite dive into the COVID-19 story as much as we had hoped to. We've gone into many other topics, so we have just a couple more minutes of your time left. Tell us a little bit about the prism through which the 19th is going to look at COVID-19, and what are the issues you've already identified consistent with your mission?
Absolutely. So, the truth is, in early March, we put our foot on the brakes. We were saying, we're getting ready to launch this startup. Should we be launching in this moment? Are we really going to be able to make a true go at this in this economic climate? And then we sort of took stock of the news cycle, and it became abundantly clear to us that, if our focus was on the disproportionate effects of COVID on women, we were going to have endless stories to write, because by virtually every metric except for mortality rates, women are being hit hardest. They're hit hardest. They're losing jobs at higher rates than men. They hold the majority of retail jobs that have vanished virtually overnight. They are the majority of frontline workers who are being sickened at hospitals and healthcare systems with COVID. They are 9 of 10 elementary school teachers who are trying to, educate, keep stock of their classrooms, their students, while also taking care of their children at home. On virtually every in virtually every arena, the work felt too critical right now. And so indeed, we didn't just put our foot back on the gas. We went into super high gear. We had a newsletter that was mostly just a once a week marketing newsletter that we turned into, it will soon be a 5-day a week, packed with news. So we are full speed ahead. Pray for us as we head into these uncharted waters, but the work is too important right now. That's the mission. And so we have to leap.
Where do you hope to be in a year?
Boy, hanging out with the two of you in person. Congratulatory beer to say that we made it.
Absolutely. And speaking of childcare, right? We have a heart out with you because you have a little one.
I have a little one, and she's the iPad battery will run out any minute. So I want to say thanks to you both for being so understanding about me managing my kiddo at home and doing this on that time.
And Emily, before you split, where do people go to find out more information about the 19th?
Absolutely. So you can check us out at 19thnews.org, or you can follow us on Twitter at 19th News. And if you're open to it, please become a founding member for $19. You can do that on our website.
Emily, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate your time in the middle of everything that's going on. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for having me.
Look forward to seeing you in Austin. Those who are watching, please stay with us. Alex and I are going to debrief a bit about what was an excellent conversation with Emily, whose ambitions are grand, important, and much needed in the news marketplace. Alex, what do you take away from all that?
I mean, she has such a strong foundation of knowledge, both on her subject matter expertise, in terms of subject matter expertise, and in terms of business models and journalism, that this is a project that makes total sense to me. And I think that, her platform here and the 19th in general will be something to watch for other businesses to see how they do it and how and the ways that they develop over time. I think it could be a great model going forward.
And she has great roots, obviously, at a pretty high profile place, the Texas Tribune, but yet, let's put COVID aside for just a minute, but yet at the end of 2019, in perilous times for the news industry, she was able to raise a significant amount of money and get a lot of backing and get ready to launch a site that's, it's about one really important topic. It's not the only topic out there. I'd like to take away, once the economy resettles, and we hope that sooner rather than later, she's a model for lots of people wanting to take on tough topics.
Right. And you've started so many businesses, Merrill. Like, if you were trying to start up a vertical specific news site right now, what would be your advice to people on doing so?
My advice would be to, especially at this moment, look for topics for which there is meaningful commercial sponsorship. And by that, the most obvious one is healthcare and healthcare on a regional or demographic basis. There's an enormous amount of coverage to be done there. And we still live in a world where companies related to healthcare and pharmaceuticals are enormously profitable, have lots of cash in the bank, would be interested in getting behind it, as would foundations and others. So that's just one example. Energy, environment, education, any number of topics. Emily mentioned Chalkbeat, the very exciting and successful site covering education and education policy on a regional basis. There are models like that I think commercial supporters and philanthropic supporters would get behind. And we were just talking about a project like this earlier today, and we want people through this program and through being in contact with us to keep their spirits up, because there is a lot of work to do. And the failing of a large metropolitan newspaper with hundreds of employees and trucks and ink and print and all of it, though tragic on many levels, doesn't really tell us about the opportunity to start 10 or 15 or 20 person newsrooms like Emily has. Emily's going to have limited overhead. Emily's going to have limited rent if she continues down the path of having a disparate staff around the country. Basically, it's for Emily salaries and T&E and promotion, and she can build hopefully a sustainable business model around an important topic. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as we discussed yesterday with Sri Srinivasan, one of the things that I'm hopeful about in this is the decentralization of offices, right? For so long, the internet promised us newsrooms that weren't just based in New York and DC, but that never completely came to fruition. Of course, organizations have people based in other locations, but so many of the staff are still based in 2 or 3 major cities. And what we saw through Emily is, you can't have an office right now, so why not hire all across the country? Why not hire not at headquarters? And I think that will create more diversity of input and perspective that will be great for the news industry in the long run. So I think there are moments of hope in this for me.
And, it is a great topic. And, Emily was, as I said a few minutes ago to her, she was very kind in letting national and regional media off the hook on their coverage and about the whole glass ceiling matter. This is a really important topic. It is puzzling to so many people why so many news organizations are so male dominated. And hopefully, Emily, both in terms of the culture they're building and the example they're setting, are going to be influential in changing all that. That's one of my hopes about the 19th and what they're going to do.
Right, and I mean, the kind of understanding that women's issues are national issues. They're not necessarily just for a female audience to consume, because as she said, we're more than half the country. We're more than half the electorate. I think that will be very interesting. And as you said, Merrill, we have an audience here that's looking for hope and looking for interesting things to see in the news industry. And so please, a reminder to share this with your friends, tag your friends on Facebook, ask us questions. Aparna, who is an amazing digital strategist, has another thought here. I thought Steve Waldman's point on yesterday's Aspen Digital Local News Dive, that bigger news orgs ended up not taking Report for America reporters with the pandemic, but none of the nonprofit newsrooms backed out. Yeah, that's interesting. Report for America, if you don't know, Steve Waldman is an amazing guy who founded BeliefNet and did a million other things. And Report for America is a nonprofit group that places, students that are just graduated or other places, or other, new to the business in newsrooms across the country. So someone who just graduated from Penn might be going to Fargo for a year, which is really, really cool and amazing. And a lot of, he had said that a lot of those people had backed out, but not the nonprofit newsrooms, which is very interesting.
Very interesting and an important point. And another example through Report for America, where journalists looking for opportunities to get out into America and cover the extraordinary things going on today and going forward in the election year and around COVID, that's another vehicle to do it. The daily newspaper might not necessarily be directly hiring. Report for America is a vehicle that can help, and we encourage people to reach out to them as well as to Emily and the 19th.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Aparna, for that great question. So I think we can wrap up, Alex, unless you had another debriefing point or anything else struck you about our conversation with Emily?
No, later tonight I will inevitably have 10 more questions and more things to say, as we all do. But I think for now, this is great. And I'm so excited we had such great participation. And please join us next week.
Next week, our guests will be newspaper analyst Ken Doctor and the CEO and publisher of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, Mike Klingsmith, one of the most innovative newspaper executives in the country. And we'll be talking about the newspaper industry. Ken's been writing about it extensively and the perils it's in around COVID and an already declining market. And Mike has been, as I said, very innovative in Minneapolis about how to take a large newspaper and make its business model as effective as possible in the current environment. So that'll be a great conversation. Please join me and Alex, Mike and Ken, for that conversation next Thursday at 6 Eastern. And thank all of you for joining us in this debut episode and be in touch with us. Thank you and have a good evening. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye, all.
Bye.